We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
Are you planning on giving notice of that?
I think we'll do it February 1st.
25% on both, sir?
Sir.
On each.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump last night, renewing his threat to impose punishing tariffs on Canada and Mexico. These latest remarks added a new urgency to the federal Liberals' cabinet retreat today, where ministers met for a second day to discuss their potential response. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau opened up the idea of going dollar for dollar against the world's biggest economy.
As I've said, everything is on the table, and I support the principle of dollar for dollar matching tariffs. It's something that we are absolutely going to be looking at if that is how they move forward.
Joining me now from the cabinet retreat is Minister of Transport and Internal Trade, Anita Anand. Minister, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
Great to be here with you, David.
Because news keeps happening in a Trump presidency, there is reporting from the Wall Street Journal just now saying that Donald Trump is using the threat of these tariffs on Canada and Mexico to try to push for an early renegotiation of NAFTA with the goal of bringing, in particular, car manufacturing back inside the United States to a significant degree. What's your reaction to this news from the Wall Street Journal?
We are prepared for every eventuality. We have been through such negotiations before with President Trump, and we are ready. We are also steady as she goes, David, because we realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And the upshot of the caucus and cabinet retreat here today is that labor leaders, business leaders, premiers, and the country at large need to be united in the face of this threat. And I will say that in addition to tariffs and counter-tariffs, we need to take a step back and realize that our approach going forward is going to involve three buckets. First of all, the tariff and counter-tariff issue. Second of all, the border and strengthening and reinforcing the border. And third of all will be defense spending and defense fortification.
Right.
So there are numerous issues for us to stay on top of, but in answer to your question, we are ready for any eventuality. We are prepared, and we will be at the table negotiating hard for Canada. This is a moment for Canada, and we all must be united.
So let's go through some of those buckets and the tariffs and counter-tariffs. The Prime Minister said today that he supports the principle of dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs. Does this mean you consider matching them up to the full $600 billion, or is there a cap on how far you would go?
This means that we will wait to see what the United States puts on the table, and we will meet them where they are with retaliatory measures in kind. We will not escalate, but we will respond. We have to remember that the relationship between Canada and the United States is interdependence. It is symbiotic, and the United States citizens depend on Canadian raw materials, Canadian energy, Canadian agricultural products, and Canadian goods from a manufacturing perspective. And so there is much to put on the table from a Canadian perspective and leverage our power.
But dollar for dollar, Minister, is 25% tariffs on $600 billion worth of goods. And there's been reporting, and I've had sources say to me that you're looking at $37 billion initially, escalating that by another $110 billion. Is there a limit on the dollar for dollar, or are you prepared as a government to go on the full $600 billion?
As the Prime Minister has said, we will use all tools in our toolbox to address any illegal tariffs that come forward. And that should not just be one province alone. All of us need to bear the sacrifice that would be made if we move forward with retaliatory measures of this sort. But as I said, Canada has vast natural resources and raw materials, and we need to diversify our markets going forward so that we ourselves are leveraging the depth of our natural resource sector.
Okay, on that, there's a lot of talk about critical minerals and how those can be leveraged against the United States. Critical minerals that are mined and refined and ready to go to market represent leverage. Critical minerals that are in the ground as potential developments maybe don't, right? So how valuable is that as a leverage point, especially when the the president now, he's eliminating things like EV mandates as not a core priority for the United States under his watch. Doesn't that lessen the value of critical minerals to some degree?
Well, David, let me tell you, from my time as Minister of National Defense, I will tell you that critical minerals in the ground, as well as critical minerals that are mined, are extremely important for the manufacturing supply chain in the defense area and beyond. And certainly in my previous conversations with the United States government, there is keen interest in Canada's critical mineral sector. Uranium stands out, nickel stands out. Let's not be blurry-eyed about the importance of Canada's natural resource sector, our ability to leverage, not just vis-a-vis the United States, but with regards to numerous trading partners who all see Canada as a vast country deep in natural resources and critical minerals.
I think it's a lot of people who look at this dispute and the demands from the president rationally see the tariffs and counter-tariffs as an unfortunate race to the bottom, right? With damage being done economically on both sides. I know your government has said you'd be there to support Canadian workers and sectors that would be hurt by this. How do you do that with Parliament prorogued? I mean, to do a large-scale wage subsidy or CERB-like program or industrial support, you're going to need the House of Commons to approve money. So how do you navigate that in the situation you're in?
Well, we know the House of Commons is coming back on March 24th, but even well before that date, we have the ability to continue to support Canadians through various supply bills that have already been passed. And I will say, as president of the Treasury Board, David, I have seen many of those funding decisions come through my desk when I was in that role, and Minister Petitpas-Taylor is ready to continue to ensure we're approving submissions as necessary to support Canadians, but also to undertake measures like fortifying the border, like ensuring that our Canadian Armed Forces are well supported, and the like.
But would you need extra parliamentary appropriation to do some sort of a large-scale support to the economic damage a trade war might inflict, or can you reprofile what's there? Not to get too technical on it, I know the border plan is $1.3 billion. A lot of money for you and me, but not in the big scheme of things for the government. Supports on a tariff war much larger than that.
Those measures are already rolling out, David, and so the supply bill that will come forward after March 24th will fund further investments, but for now we are able to do the work that we've said we will do, fortifying the border, ensuring that defense spending is increasing, ensuring that we are ready for any eventuality that comes by us through the tariff and counter-tariff discussion.
No, I appreciate that Parliament is due back on the 24th of March, but you know what the opposition says you'll be facing when you go back. It's a full non-confidence vote designed to trigger an election. So the ability to respond to any of the economic consequences seems limited to me based on the calendar and what Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Blanchet, and Mr. Singh have all said, right? So how do you work around that should you need large national scale supports?
David, we are doing the work that we need to do right now to respond to what we are hearing from the Trump administration. That includes ensuring greater security at the border. That includes ensuring that Canadians have the benefit payments that they need in this time, whether it is pharmacare or dental care. We are ensuring that we are ready for the eventuality that comes forward, whether it's February 1st, whether it's April. We were ready today if that was the case, but we are going to continue to be all hands on deck.
I know initially when this threat was made, Minister, it was all about the border. It was about fentanyl. It was about migrant trafficking, when the problem is much larger on the Mexico-U.S. border than it is with Canada. Now this reporting from the Wall Street Journal suggests it's actually leverage on an early trade negotiation. I know it's very difficult to read the mind of President Trump, but does that make you reconsider whether or not the border could be enough and whether there is a new ante that is required in this game of poker?
I don't think that it's wise for us to take an either-or approach to this, David. What we need to do is be very comprehensive about the approach we're taking across the board. That means viewing fortification of the border as a priority. That means ensuring that the counter-tariff package is ready to go in various tranches. That means making sure that we're increasing defense spending, we are increasing the speed of our procurements so that we can be a solid partner in terms of our defense and multilateral alliances.
Okay, one last question, because I know you got to go. It's an either-or question. Who are you going to support in the Liberal leadership race? People are taking sides. A lot of your cabinet colleagues are lining up behind Mark Carney, some with Chrystia Freeland. Where are you on this? Have you made up your mind and you're prepared to tell us what you're going to do?
I'm actually focused more on caucus unity at this very moment. I know each of the candidates and have great respect for each of the candidates. But at this point, especially going into national caucus on Thursday and Friday, in the middle of a leadership race, we need to be united. We have to be able to fight the next election together, regardless of the outcome on March 9th, and that means that being united is the name of the game. And I've spoken with caucus members across the country, including in terms of my transport file, but much beyond that as well. And I will really be so excited to see everybody on Thursday and Friday.
Does that mean you're staying neutral? Or will you endorse someone later? How should I interpret that?
I'm continuing to have conversations with as many caucus members as possible, David, and certainly it's an exciting time in the life of the Liberal Party, but it's an important moment for Canada as a whole. And as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade, I love working and I'm going to keep working for the benefit of this great country.
Okay, Minister, I've gone over time. Thank you for being here as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade, Anita. Anand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Take good care.
Laura Dawson is on the Canada-U.S. Trade Council. She's Executive Director of the Future Border Coalitions, and she joins me now. I'm having some flashbacks to the first Trump presidency. I know you may be as well. What do you make of February 1? It was January 20th initially announced February 1. Do we take this deadline seriously?
I think we should take everything seriously. I mean, it's just at such an accelerated pace. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to figure out how alarmed we should be because the hits just keep on coming. It looks to me as though Mexico is really in the crosshairs, but Canada is definitely in line for collateral damage. Is it about USMCA CUSMA? Is it about fentanyl borders? I mean, we've got credible, fact-based defenses on all of these things, but this is not a guy who cares very much about facts. He cares about what he's looking at that particular moment.
Right.
And so he's really got Canadians, government, business on their back foot.
Yeah, he's talked about how it has nothing to do with the USMCA. They've allowed, just let me call this up. He said in that it has nothing to do with the USMCA. They've allowed both of them, Canada very much so. They've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. I mean, you can argue all you want, and facts and data all you want. I don't know if it matters, right? So how do you approach it?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter. So it seems like we need to figure out what the bright, shiny object is that's going to get his attention, that he's going to be able to say, yep, I did that. Canada was here, and now it's there, and I take credit for that. But we really don't know what that is. I mean, on fentanyl, the numbers should be worrisome to anyone because any cross-border movement of fentanyl is a bad thing.
Sure.
But the percentage is so small compared to southern borders. Similarly, migration, so small compared to southern border. We see that the government has come out with announcements about a new border plan. Is that what Donald Trump wants? And how much of our lives as Canadians is going to be spent over the next 4 years trying to figure out what Donald Trump wants and how to give it to him?
Yeah, it's day 2 of 1,461. So,
Not that we're counting.
so hydrate. But look, fentanyl obviously a massive issue, and it's a tragedy on Canadian streets, right? We're seeing that playing out here. We have the same kind of overdose problem that they have because of its infusion into the drug supply, and it's a very complicated problem. And I'm not sure if it is the border he wants, or if it's defense spending he wants, if it's all of the above, or he just wants this constant specter of threat to sort of to get things from people. Because look at what has happened even before he came into office. Are you worried that this is just going to be what Canada has to endure for the duration of the Trump presidency, that this hangs there unless you give him what he wants on whatever he wants it on?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who wants simple solutions to very complex problems. And we've seen the government respond on a border spending plan, and that's great. But real movement on anti-illicit trade, movement of drugs and people across the border, that takes a really comprehensive plan along the level of a Canada-U.S. free trade agreement, an IJC, a NORAD for North America. Are we ready to do that? Because we really don't have the kind of chops in Ottawa right now that are planning to do such a massive response.
So on that, there is also this challenge, as I'm sure you are aware, that in this threat from Donald Trump, a lot of politicians are playing politics and using the chaos of it to advance their own political agendas. But there is a discussion over how hard you can hit back. Right, so Chrystia Freeland has said dollar for dollar. Jagmeet Singh has said dollar for dollar. The Prime Minister said today he supports it in principle, but it feels like there's a ceiling to how far Canada can realistically go, because hitting all $600 billion in goods in retaliation just compounds the economic misery. So, like, what is the consequence of meeting this dollar for dollar at full scale head on if Trump follows through on his word?
So any retaliatory action costs Canada and costs Canadians, makes products more expensive for Canadians, affects Canada's competitiveness. So the question is, what do you target? And I think that Ottawa's laid out a plan that is starting with iconic products, orange juice, etc., moving on to a broader range of products, and not excluding export taxes on resources. But once you get up into that area, you are really shooting yourself first and then shooting the other guy. And having a kind of knee-jerk reaction like, we ought to boycott the United States, we ought to do this, that's just not helpful. We really have to figure out how to maintain and save the relationship in the midst of the current chaos.
So what's your sense on that? Because you have the premiers all united on this Team Canada approach, with the exception of Daniel Smith, who says you can't use the threat of our oil industry against them because of what you do to my economy. A position you can understand the Premier of Alberta taking. But the argument then is that it weakens the Team Canada approach. My sense of it is, by the time you got to doing anything with Alberta oil, the economic war is already so bad. You are pressing the nuclear option there. I mean, is that your sense of it? There's like a bunch of things you would do before you got to that point.
Yeah, a bunch of things between now and then. I like to see the premiers coming forward and making statements that people can take seriously. But if you get people talking at cross purposes and we'll do this and we'll do that, then we're actually negotiating against ourselves.
Do you think that's what's happening with Smith being the outlier here? I mean, what's your sense of? You know Washington way better than I ever will.
Well, I mean, she's taking a position based on her interest in Alberta oil.
Right.
All props to that. I also think Doug Ford's doing a very good job in messaging, exactly. But we have to take a staged approach, one by one by one, until we get to, to that very serious point that I hope we never reach, because that's really going to hurt the relationship. And I think that we also have to recognize this is a brand new government. Trump is shooting from the lip, but there are appointments to be made. There are bureaucratic positions to be filled. The administration of the U.S. government is intentionally designed to slow things down. That's what the framers of the Constitution intended, so that they can balance any president who is just going too far too fast. The bureaucracy is a weight and a check on his ability to move forward.
Do you think that still holds, though, with the way the Republican Party has completely reformed itself into the MAGA Party, and all the sort of conventional Republicans, if we can call them that, from the first time around? Not there, right? Some of them had to be pardoned in advance by Joe Biden because of everything. Like, are those same breaks there, and are they as robust?
At the legislative level, it is really the Wild West. You just don't know. But the bureaucracy required to, for example, renegotiate the CUSMA USMCA, that is a lot of bodies, and that's a lot of bodies filling jobs that aren't currently filled. So in order to get those appointments, in order to get people doing their homework to crack open the text and say, okay, this is what we want and how, that's not something that Jameson Greer, the new USTR, has been doing at home on the weekends. These are incredibly complex legal texts that have to be parsed for the U.S. interest, and those people are just not on the job doing that. So that will take time.
We spoke to David McNaughton yesterday. I'm sure you know well, the former ambassador to Washington on the show, and you know, Daniel Smith talks about a double win. David McNaughton says you got to give him a win. He needs some sort of an arrangement here where it looks like he won, he can claim victory, but without it being too detrimental to this side of the border. How do you calibrate something like that? Like, what is Canada's best path forward here to satisfy the transactional nature of the president without blowing things up for Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a crisis we can possibly take advantage of. After 9/11, we had a security and prosperity partnership that really leaned into modernizing the relationship for both security and trade. I think we can do that again, and that's the kind of big ticket headline issue that a Donald Trump would appreciate. He's not a detail guy. We know he's not a detail guy, so we don't have to have everything worked out there, but we have to give him a lot of sizzle and some steak, and it has to look like it's his idea.
The argument that a lot of people keep making is the leverage that oil gives Canada, critical minerals gives Canada. Most of the oil in Canada goes to one customer. I know there's been some diversification of fossil fuels through LNG and Coastal GasLink and of course TMX. A lot of the critical minerals are in the ground, right? They're not developed, they're not even permitted in some cases, certainly not refined and ready to go. How strong is that leverage, really, in real terms with Donald Trump?
Oh, at this point, it's not super strong because, as you say, our development and permitting is so slow. So I think part of a bigger strategy involves really accelerating how quickly Canada can respond to and lean into new issues. I mean, in my work, working with Canadian officials, they do their best, but they have been so slow in responding. And my American counterparts are always saying, can't you speed those guys up? This government has, as a whole, has not been nimble, has not been agile, has not been leaning into new initiatives, and now is the time to do that.
Yeah, and time is running out. We're out of time. Laura Dawson, I always appreciate your time, though. That's Laura Dawson, the Executive Director of the Future Border Coalition. Thank you so much.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in. I think we'll do it February 1st.
25% on both, sir.
On each.
On each,
Yeah.
So a new deadline now looms over Canada. In just 11 days, U.S. President Donald Trump says he'll impose those steep tariffs on all Canadian goods. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is considering dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs in response.
If they do move forward with tariffs, our response will be robust and rapid and measured, but very strong. The goal will be to get those tariffs off as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, everything is on the table.
Now, nearly all the provinces agree with that Canada must stand united and firm against Trump's threat. But Alberta Premier Daniel Smith remains the outlier.
I don't know that this particular administration and this particular president responds well to threats. My interpretation of the president is he likes to win. And so it's up to us to demonstrate how we can get a double win. We do have to be realistic. We're an economy that's 1/10 the size of the Americans. That we are far more reliant on the trade relationship with them than they are on us. And so trying a tit-for-tat tariff war without addressing the underlying issues it's not going to go well for Canada.
The federal government has attempted to address one of those underlying issues. It's presented the U.S. with a $1.3 billion plan to beef up the border. So what does Canada do now? Let's bring in the power panel on that. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. And here with me in the studio is the Globe and Mail's Marika Walsh. It's good to see you all. Michelle, the Prime Minister expressing an openness to dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs I think that's up to a point. I don't think that's the full $600 billion like Chrystia Freeland has staked out, because the blowback on that is pretty enormous. What's your sense of how far Canada can and should go if Trump follows through on this?
Well, I think that we've got to go as far as we can. The Americans have to feel it. They have to feel the countervailing kind of tariffs. Otherwise, we're just rolling over. And, you know, you listen to Danielle Smith and trying to psychoanalyze President Trump, which I'm not sure anybody could do. But the answer is not to just let him walk all over us and to just destroy our economy. He's not going to back down because we play nice. And the only way that he is potentially going to come to see reason is if there is some kind of a consequence on their side of the border as well. If their folks, and I think we have to use absolutely every tool at our disposal. And so I'm encouraged that the Prime Minister is saying that. Quite frankly, I'm encouraged that Poilievre is saying that, and that the two leading leadership candidates are also saying it. So that there should be a very clear message going down there. And, you know, I don't understand what Danielle Smith is doing, but I hope that she actually kind of joins Team Canada on this and quits kind of, you know, lollygagging around at Mar-a-Lago and trying to make a new buddy.
Right.
It's not going to work her way.
Well, Pierre Poilievre says a strong tariff response is to be on the table, but Michelle, he hasn't said using oil as a leverage point should be on the table explicitly, right? He's been asked about that. I don't think he's given a clear position on it. Am I wrong, or do we know? Kate,
no, I think
Michelle, go ahead. Yeah.
I think you're right. He hasn't been explicit, and one would hope that he would be explicit, but nor has he been following what Danielle Smith is saying. So, you know, it is up to him to actually come out one side or the other, and hopefully that he's going to be part of Team Canada. I'm going to try and hold out hope that he actually will put something before his own political ambitions, and that is to try and preserve and protect Canada's economy and fight as best as we can.
Kate, you don't like that analysis? What's your thoughts there?
It is. Yeah, my God, if we're talking about political ambitions, we should be talking about Justin Trudeau, not talking about Pierre Poilievre. It is not incumbent on the leader of the opposition to table what Canada's plan for tariffs and a retaliatory response should be. That is the duty of the Prime Minister of Canada. Unfortunately, he abdicated the responsibility and the leadership role because he couldn't see past his own ego, and he has forced Canada into inward navel-gazing political drama as opposed to actually coming up with a plan. I think the issue right now, David, is not what Pierre Poilievre thinks about retaliatory tariffs. It's that there's too many people saying what they think retaliatory tariffs should be. There's no clear negotiator for Canada right now, and that is the fault of the Prime Minister, not Pierre Poilievre.
Well, look, I wasn't asking Michelle for that clarity to put anything on Pierre Poilievre just to make sure I hadn't missed something, because I thought he was like, yeah, we need a robust response, but he had no clear position yet on what to do about oil. He says he's not the Prime Minister. He doesn't need a position. Neither is Danielle Smith. Neither is Doug Ford. Politicians are weighing in. So I wonder, Kate, your thoughts on what Danielle Smith had to say. We need to find a way for a double win here because Trump likes to win. Can you have a double win with a guy like Trump, or do you need to find a way that it looks like a win for him without too much damage to Canada?
Two things can be true. I think that you can both table a retaliatory response that is measured and defends Canadian interests. And you heard the federal Conservative leader say that that should be the case. It's also true that there are underlying issues. I think that was the wording that Premier Smith used. And one of those underlying issues is the border. Yes, there was a $1.3 billion plan for that. A lot of that funding, David, and a lot of the legislative change that would have accompanied that plan was put on the back burner due to prorogation. It's effectively moot. So one thing the government could do that would have a real benefit right now, recall Parliament, table border legislation. It was something that the parties prior to this point all said that they would support. It was the government that chose to put that on hiatus with prorogation. So recall Parliament, pass border measures, and then have a substantive conversation about tariffs. But unless and until that is fixed, we can't expect to see much action. And basically Donald Trump has said that, but the Liberals have acknowledged that as well.
Well, he has said, Francois, like he said initially, the border was the issue with fentanyl and migrants. Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that it's really just about forcing an earlier negotiation of NAFTA. And then he has also said it's other things. They're abusing the rules. They're abusing that. I mean, Trump says many things, and it is absolutely unclear if any of them last beyond the moment, other than the threat. The threat is ever present. The motivation and the demand to get out from under the threat, that can change.
Definitely. And I will take the writing before the wording anytime. Doesn't mean that his words are not important. It tells a lot about his state of mind, what his bottom line is. But sometimes, thank God, he's got some advisors that might say, listen, there's rules to abide with, even though he doesn't like rules and rules of law. And in that aspect, that's why the order that he signed last night was all about having some advice by the 1st of April to see what would be best according to the situation, according to the facts, which sounds very reasonable in my opinion, because then you can come up and say, okay, you remember I talked to you about 25%, here's the situation, blah, blah, blah. Today we learned that maybe, which is what a lot of people in the negotiation world and in the economic world were thinking, this is all about NAFTA 2.0. It's about reopening, deja vu. We lived that not that long ago. Right. So, knowing that premise, then it's good to be ready for every possibility. I don't want to defend Danielle Smith, but if other provinces had as much to lose as Alberta, I can understand why it's easy from us in Quebec or in Atlantic Canada to look at it and say, hey, be with us in Canada and stand up and give us your oil to block and use as a threat against the bad Americans. But the situation is, and I like her premise when she says, you have to know the negotiator. Before you negotiate anything, you have to understand, and she's right when she says what Donald Trump likes is to win or feel like he wins. And there's ways. I mean, I teach that to kids. Right. You don't have to get out of negotiation and say, hey, I got him on his knees. You will never win against Donald Trump. That way you have to make him sound like he won. Even though the last time we let go a lot of things, we made it sound that we gained something, but we made it sound like the Americans gained something. So we have to play with all of these, but I will take the writing before his mouth, because his mouth goes on and on and on.
Look, every province, every premier has a sector of their economy that is extremely valuable to them and an outsized level of significance in their economy. Oil would kill Newfoundland and Labrador if that became a thing, where I'm from, and they have no capacity to recover from it in a way a larger province like Alberta does. So there's a lot at stake here, Marie. You can understand a provincial wanting to defend it, but just quick thoughts from you on where things are right now, because the president is speaking again, so we're going to go hear from him in just a second.
Where we are is the whipsaw and seesaw we will be on for the next 4 years. I mean, you saw cabinet ministers almost celebrating pre-Donald Trump's late night news conference last night, which I think raises questions about how close to his office they actually are, because they did not know this was coming. Maybe his office didn't know this was coming either, but I think that's a reasonable question and an important one. And the tone changed dramatically. Just like we don't have the full picture of what Canada's response is to the tariffs, because the government says we don't know the tariffs yet, so we're not putting it all on the table. Pierre Poilievre also has said, we don't have tariffs to respond to yet. I'm not putting it on the table. So there is a bit of a wait and see from everybody right now.
Yeah, a lot of people trying to advance their own political agendas in this chaos. And it's only day 2 of 1,461 days of the Trump presidency.